will go on mute. So over to you. Yes. Thank you, Sudarshan sir, for actually taking out time, and thanks, Preeti ma'am, for hosting this for us. And over to you now.
Okay. Uh, Welcome, Professor Sudarshan. Professor Sudarshan Suchi is a name that actually does not need any introduction in our community. And some of us, including me, have been actually extra privileged to have been taught by him uh, at IRMA. And for me, God is further kind to that IA has assigned this task to host his talk. So I'm really very grateful. Sir has a very illustrious, close to 40 years of professional journey so far. To be precise, 37 years. And he continues to rock in this ever evolving space of development and transformation. Uh, he is a graduate of philosophy from Delhi University, and unlike many of us, he immediately started working after his graduation, and then he did his uh, and in terms of his now he started working at Nilgiris, and then he went to Society for Promotion of Baseland Development. Then he came to Anand with NTGCF, which is now known as FES. He worked with NDDB in various capacities for almost 13-14 years, and from there he moved to Reliance Industries, where he was looking after the farm advocacy, biofuel, etc. And then he led the Bharat India Jodo Rural Transformation Program at Reliance Foundation. And after serving for, I would say, another 13-14 years at Reliance, he then moved to SOS as CEO. And then, as he was talking about that, since 2020, during COVID time, so when children actually now needed more people in the ecosystem, like Professor Sudarshan, he joined Save the Children India, and he has been working there since then. And I see that recently he Save the Children India actually underwent a big rebranding exercise only in July. So that is a very warm welcome, Professor Sudarshan. The entire IRMA alum community is indeed very thankful to you to take out time on a weekend for us. So, where should I begin? Uh, can I ask? I would like to see, as we have said, that it's a leadership talk. You have been a veteran. You are such a big name in the civil society space as a leader. But I would like you to kind of, how did a philosophy graduate land up in Nilgiris? And if we have to look back, you actually worked for a very short period there, 11 or 12 months, just a close to 1 year. So if you look back now, how do you see that? Were the moments which actually defined the Sudarshan that we know today?
Okay, so thank you. First of all, just Sudarshan would do, please. Yeah,
But I'll
and
tell you, yes, we have been trying that, but I would say that because the classroom context has actually is still
and I really don't respond well to platitude. I mean, I've just not learned in all these years how to
okay.
gracefully accept, compliments and context. They just sound too unme, frankly. But thank you. Thanks for that. So, when I graduated in 1996, my college, I mean, it's a small college in DU, and bulk of the people, I mean, everybody had plans even before joining graduation. Bulk of the people after the graduation would join IIM or civil service or go abroad to study. In fact, those days, most parents sent their children to college for that, to become something and become somebody, and like it was an investment there. And I dreaded those plans. I didn't want to be in civil service. I just didn't have it in me to get a kind of structured education anymore. I am. Behind that was also the reason that I took up philosophy, assuming it would invite originality, imagination, creativity, and general, debate. And to my disappointment, so first year I really slogged and read everything under the sky, medieval, ancient Indian, Western, everything, and promptly got a third division in the exam because I realized that answering questions was a different thing than learning and getting educated. And it was a disappointment. So, second, third year, I just let go. I had a ball, and I spent more time wooing a girl who's now my wife since then for last 37 years. And I spent much more time there, and I topped the uni and all. It was fine, but I kind of had a skepticism on classroom learning. And I thought parents are going to be very disappointed if I don't charter the course of IAM or civil service. So I just took the first job that came in sight. So the college used to get invites from various places for management trainees, etc. And among them were these plantations, Tata's and Harrison's Malayalam.
Hmm.
And I just applied there for the heck of it actually. That was the furthest from home. And I went there. That's how I landed up there in Nilgiris. And to to answer your specific question, one of the biggest lessons in life, two, three of them I learned in the plantations. So tea plantations is very high profit and very high labor intensive at the same time.
Yeah.
And I learned what I didn't want to do actually in my life. I mean, I kind of, in the sense that I learned it in a very kind of fairly certain manner. Sometimes it's a vague thing that you have, that you may want to do this, you may not want to do that. But I think that's one thing I figured out there for sure. This is not me. So that is what was the short stint. But what I loved doing there was also, it was very labor intensive, though the code of conduct didn't like the management to interface with the labor. But I just loved being around people, mingling, talking, learning how life looks from their side, learning to do everything that they did their way.
Right.
So if they walked barefoot in the plantation, I tried barefoot. If they plucked leaves early morning on a rainy day, I tried to do that. If they were there late, everything that they did, and that way, we really mingled. But I learned what not to do. So that was my tea plantation thing. And then uh, how I quit was, actually, I came for leave, and my wife and I were wondering that people around us were getting married, older, but they said who didn't know each other for long enough. And I said, we've known each other long enough. Why are we not getting married? So why don't we do that? So I said, ठीक है, मैं जाके resign करके आता हूँ, and then let's get married, and then I'll look for a job.
That's very interesting.
So that's how the short of 1 year ended there, because if I'd finished 1 year, I would have had to give 3 months notice there.
Okay.
So, so it was a very selfish calculation. So that's how my 1 year in tea plantation resulted in what not to do and what do I very vaguely love doing, which defined my seeking future jobs.
Okay. So from there, then how actually you went to SPWD, the Society for
Yeah.
Promotion of Wasteland.
So and that has a slight Irma story to it also.
Okay.
So I came back to Delhi, and I didn't know what I was looking for. I wanted to engage with communities very vaguely. And by the way, NGO was not a term very prevalent then. It was VAs, voluntary agencies, is what
Agencies.
we talked about or got to know about. And I went to many of them. SPWD, Pradhan, and DA were just starting. F Pro and all were for some time already there. And honestly, none would take me because I didn't have a appropriate degree,
Agree.
so to say, a professional degree to work with, and neither was I engineer nor a social work degree nor an IRMAN. Because they asked specifically that are you rural management or anything,
Oh.
and I didn't have any of that. And the head of SPWD was kinder than others. He would often invite me for a cup of tea and was mentoring me, in some ways. And he
Mm-hmm.
asked me really, what am I looking for in life and how? So I said, all I want to do is to be given an opportunity to engage, learn. And so he said, what can you do? I said, whatever any other person called a professional can do, I can do same as them or better if I can be given 3 months to learn hands on. And he said, well, we have an opening in the Himalayas, central Himalayas, Gadwal and Kumaon on the front line working as a program associate, the bottom of food chain. And if I would be game. So they gave me that opportunity, and my very highest learning curve was with SPWD. There were 6 wonderful years of engaging directly at grassroots and also getting exposure across the country to some of the best movements which were then just fledgling and starting. Anna Hazare had just landed up at Raleigh City.
Okay.
Uh, Pido Mada in Rajasthan, Dungarpur was not yet Pido. It was yet to start. Devilal Vyasji had just landed there, and Chipko was there for some
Starting.
years. Chirag, the NGO, was just beginning. So it was like really a greenfields area, for me to learn firsthand.
True.
Most hilarious was, though, that most of my colleagues were Irmans. They came in. That was not hilarious. What was hilarious was that these were people who were familiar with terminologies called MOU, BLW, proposals, project. I didn't know these words. I didn't even know
Okay.
the full form of MOU. I just didn't have any clue. So I picked it on the way, learned. So
Mm-hmm.
SPWD was very high learning curve, really, and it defined most of what I am today, the larger context of
Right.
participatory processes, community engagement, institution building.
Yeah.
These were not words that were for me familiar then. I'm saying this in retrospect
True.
that, yeah.
And I can see that you have worked for so many years. And after doing your experiments with all these participatory approaches, now working with people at grassroots level, etc., you actually I would say 7, 8 years back, you went to IDS to do a full post graduation masters in participatory thing. How was that in the sense like because now I think a lot of it that almost everything you had done, and then
Yeah.
you're going to the classroom.
So it was very funny, one is, I first got exposure to the whole idea. It used to be called RRA then, Rapid Rural
Rapid
Appraisal.
rural
This
appraisal.
is in the early 80s. And Professor Robert Chambers had come to India, Nepal for some program. He was 50 something then, and I was 22, 23 then. And I was sent to one such workshop. And I thought, what a ancient old man. And whatever it is, a white man. I mean, his ideas and the thing didn't kind of immediately settle and register in me. And I
Hmm.
kind of, so to say, dissed it, came back and got down to work. And with every year that I spent, I thought it made more and more sense that whose reality counts kind of a context.
Yeah.
And in 2, 3, 4 years, participatory process became an obsession with me. And I had a dream of wanting to study under him. Initially, I just couldn't afford. Then I got too busy doing my work. And yet, I mean, that was the only thing and the only place where I wanted to study ideas, participatory processes, and with Professor Robert Chambers. By the
Chambers.
time I landed there, I was older than when I first met him, he was. and I thought he was too old. He was 89. He still took Saturday workshops on participatory processes. Most of my classmates were younger than my son, and I stayed in the university accommodation. So I think it was a very wonderful reflective and learning time for me. One is I got to know the generation of my son and probably my son through them much better than I knew while we were at the same house, because our timings just didn't match. We
Right.
clocked different time zones within the same house. More than that, I also got time to reflect, time to structure, and pretty my biggest learning was the gap. So I had actually this whole thing between the practitioner and the academic researcher, a wall.
Yeah.
I honestly didn't have much respect for academicians, academics, and research. And
True.
I thought that they were a kind of rude intervention into our work, which was a bit more serious, severe, and we were like delivering. So there I got time to see the use and the wonderful blend between practice and theory, between research and action. And
Hmm.
I mean, my resolve was that my biggest take was wherever I work, I would encourage people, more people from practice to go to academics and research. And
Sweet.
actually, when I came to meet you at IRMA, primarily the reason was to also then build a bridge from academics to people to
Yeah.
come to the ground, so that the better combination of the two is
Yeah.
what will raise the bar for overall development approach, as a context, if
Yeah.
working in cross purposes or isolation
Yes.
of each other. So that
Isolation
was the
is.
biggest take from the IDS experience.
Yeah, I fully agree with this idea that now the interface and collaborating with the people who are working at the now in the field is very important for an academician to also for an academician to grow and to indulge in meaningful research. Otherwise, yes, there could be many research for the sake of just and for the heck of it, and we are publishing, but may not be really read by anyone. Very true. Uh, I just kind of now moved from like from your initial years at SPWD to directly to IDS, and in between we have I think there are now some 20-25 years of
Yeah,
your very your professional life, which needs to be like now we need to understand that. So it's like how did you kind of from SPWD you did you join NTGCF at Anand, or you were working somewhere else, or was it the first
so
entry point to Anand?
yeah, so I'm just just feel free to
Yeah,
stop me whenever
yeah,
the
yeah.
stories get a bit dull, because for everything there is a story behind what
Yes.
happened. So what took us to Anand was actually Anandalaya more than anything else.
Oh my
So
God.
yeah, so the principal of Anandalaya and my wife used to work together for long. And he used to come to our house in Delhi and would say that nobody ever comes to Anand to teach. Everybody is a wife of somebody or something who doesn't find anything else to do and therefore would join as teachers, because professionals just teaching professionals at least. He said, why ever not? He said that mostly, always the wives follow the husbands, and that's where the life goes on and all. He said, no, no, that's not true, actually. I mean, people do, work for the sake of work. And and remember, this was late 80s, early 90s. I mean, a lot of things have changed now, though. So he said, well, if you guys say so, I mean, let me see if your husband follows you, karke. I said, why ever not? I would certainly be happy to do that. So she applied, she got their job, and while she was applying, we came to visit Anand and
Okay.
stayed with a very close friend of mine, guy called Theophilus, who used to work for Tree Growers then. I mean, what is now
Yeah.
FES. He was the first
FES.
ED of FES, but before that, Tree National NTGCF. So we were staying with him. He said, if she's coming here, what are you going to do? I said, I have not thought about it at all. And then they said, why don't you work for us? So I said, fine. And my interest was more from SPWD. I had learned the idea of community working, but I had heard and I had worked mostly SPWD was of IRMANs. And I had heard of Anand, I'd heard of IRMA. Manthan was still new. The idea of cooperatives, collectives, institutions. I was very curious about all this. And I thought that, wow, I mean, what more do you need than an invitation to be at Anand and you can learn firsthand? So that's how I landed up there
Okay.
at Anand. Yeah. And from the beginning, first my wife bought a house in Irma as an Anandalia person. And then so my entire Anand innings, whatever the institution, but we were at Irma, I mean, continuously. Yeah, for
Okay.
all the years.
Yeah.
So
So, and from there you joined NDDB and
yeah, yeah.
okay.
So NDDB actually then was so while I joined NDDB's cooperative department, but actually the doctor this was the time when Manmohan Singh had just taken over as finance minister, economic liberalization,
Yeah.
and among various events that happened was that in the pre-budget consultations, Dr. Kurian was refused and cooperatives were refused time by him to give their side of what are their asks. So he
Okay.
decided that, like industries and all, CII, FICCI, he, along with one Mr. Mohan Dharia, who was a former vice chairman of Planning Commission, and one Mr. L.C. Jain, Gandhian
Yeah.
economist and
Platform.
another
Okay.
cooperative person. The three of them said, we'll start a movement of cooperatives, getting 1 million cooperative leaders under one umbrella to counter and have a counter presence to the CII, FICCI, and ASSOCHAM, etc. And we will also create a movement of our own. We can't manage with the finances, but we'll create our vote banks and we'll seek policy, legislative reforms and all. It was called Cooperative Initiative.
Initiative.
So, I got the opportunity to work as its kind of secretary or chief executive. It was housed in IRMA. So that's how I joined NDDB and got opportunity to work directly with Dr. Kurian actually for long years on the cooperative reforms related. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how the shift came to
Mhm.
NDDB.
And then from while working on this cooperative initiative,
Yeah.
you enrolled for a law program at Sardar Patel
Yes. Yes.
University and con
Yeah.
continue
So
to learn as well.
yeah, I formally studied law because my work was all with about cooperative law, and I thought law was common sense, and somehow most of the key decision makers wouldn't take us seriously because they thought that if you don't have a law degree, you may not understand law or you wouldn't
Yeah.
understand. So I said that okay, let me get the degree also for you, and that's how I studied
Okay.
and took law. And bulk of my, I don't know if you would recall, the teaching of LE to you people was also
Yeah.
saying that
Also,
the words you don't understand don't have a relevance. I
yeah,
mean,
true.
it's
Each
rest
one
of the
of us would
words.
remember those lines.
Yeah,
Yes, yes. And then I think from CIP you went on to now South
yeah,
and
to
did
Vijayawada.
some lot of transformation there in the dairy
Yeah,
cooperative sector.
yeah,
So
that was actually in one of those life's what do you call wonderful gifts that happen by accident. So NDDB was setting up the state offices, and Andhra Pradesh was one such state. And typically, dairy technologists or veterinary doctors were the NDDB's chosen people to lead any initiative.
yeah,
I was neither of those two. But CIP had come to an end, and I got so they couldn't find a place, so they sent me there. And Andhra was in absolute doldrums. Out of seven dairy cooperatives, five were closed, and we were at war with the state federation and everything. Whatever could go wrong went wrong, and I didn't know the cow's front from the back kind of a context or the dairy engineering. So I went there, And it was one of the most wonderful learning experience, because when you're at zero, your progression is infinity,
Indeed.
especially if you're a keen learner. And while saying that, Preeti, I want to mention that my lessons for myself in whole life has been that leadership is all about actually willingness to learn. It's not about
Yes.
rank, it's not about power, and it's not about position and things. It's about how effective and how, welcome, or how relevant you are in any place to be able to contribute and add value. So for me, the 6 years there were literally revolutionary. We turned around, we revived those five diaries, but more importantly, we started two initiatives which were the first of their kind in India and even for NDDP. These were the women's dairy cooperative. One of them was Mulkanur Dairy, and it took us to the street. So post Manthan, the post Operation Flood NDDB, these were the first ones back again on the ground to be organizing and doing things, everything, from the dairy village institution to the processing to the marketing, everything in and around, and eventually to start a new parallel federation. And by the way, all this was happening also under the aegis of a parallel cooperative law in Andhra called Max Act, which had come around in 95 due to our work in CIP, due to our advocacy work. So
True.
that legal reform is what resulted in the Max Act, and that got there. And just as an aside, not relevant here, what is very popularly known as the FPOs now, Producer
No.
Company Act, it got written by a few people, including me, in the ETDC of IRMA. The drafts of it were done there. Eventually, the committee of Dr. Patel and Dr. Alag and all presented it in Parliament through the government, but it got
Okay.
drafted at IRMA, and I was
Okay.
one of the persons engaged with it. Yeah.
Okay.
So Andhra was very fruitful for my learning curve. Actually, everything, SPWD and then working at advocacy, each one was a new beginning, a different beginning than before. Huge learning value for me, and
True.
therefore maximum energy was contributed by me happily. And
Would
yeah,
be happy to know that Mulkanur continues to be part of now the course pack, the town material of the course managing cooperatives and
yeah,
collectives, because now FPCs are also being talked about in that course.
yeah.
So that's really great too. So how do you see the dairy cooperative sector now, or you are like now
Yeah.
done with it and you're focusing more
Very
on
quickly,
your
Amra,
So,
extraordinary.
so I don't know whether on this platform of IRMA, and after having worked for so long with NDDB, whether this would be counted as sedition. But I would say the FPOs are headed the cooperative way, which means the reasons that cooperatives didn't work was because somebody decided for somebody else that it's a good idea that that set of people would cooperate with each other.
yeah.
You know, we who live in, most of us live in housing societies, in gated communities in urban India, and we are unable to cooperate around parking and around garbage collection and managing our lifts. Big
True.
disputes happen. And then to go around believing that we could be teaching some rural communities to come together and work and do magic,
Hmm.
I think it doesn't work that way. That's one. And second is, I think any collective which is formed when the need is not felt internally, locally,
Yeah.
it is bound to fail. So I think what happened with cooperatives, they failed massively. There were the exceptions which succeeded. And I think we could be repeating history with this, because the same spirit is there. Somebody has decided for somebody else that this is a good idea. This is a solution, although I don't know your problem. So I'm going
Hmm.
to fix it through this formula, one
Yeah.
size fits all. So I think cooperatives to that extent. And I mean, I am sure in most of you, while at IRMA, would have been taught in some course or other that irrespective of the highest context of cooperatives, the dairy cooperatives were never more than 10-15% of the dairy industry in India. Organized sector itself was a minority. You know,
Yes.
the majority was and is continues to be
Continues to
unorganized.
be unorganized.
Yeah. So I think it has relevance, it has significance,
Mm,
it balances in the option, but it's not the only option, and
true.
that way. So
Mm,
it needs to be seen in balance.
imbalance.
Yeah.
So it's like from the, I think from dairy sector, then you moved towards the farm advocacy and you worked very closely with the now the leadership at Reliance on and then you initiated this program on rural transformation. And I remember that that's when like we had an opportunity as a at IRMA to interact with you, and you generously recruited many of our IRMA graduates in 2011-12
Yeah.
for the Bharat India Jodo program, which was, if I'm not wrong, it was mainly on like how we can convert or how we can cultivate on the culturable wasteland.
Yeah.
And so it was that the time when you actually started training yourself as a farmer, because we used to hear stories from now
Yes.
Professor Vishwas here that Sudarshan has bought some wasteland and he's doing farming there. So how like this is again, it's like now going to some 300 villages, some
Yeah.
now different states and spearheading, leading this program. How what kind of challenges, what are the kind of learnings that you had there?
So this so the Reliance Foundation actually started with me. I was the first employee, and the idea of conceptualizing that, and we had thought again of village institutions and working with farmers around a value proposition around their land. That how do you get the basis, the hypothesis was that the migrant agriculture labor by and large predominantly is of farmers whose own land who they are unable to cultivate. What you said, culturable waste, they are not
Yes.
wasteland, as in not capable of producing at all. And so that's where so we thought that if we could turn that around, the migration, it would have a big impact on it if we could make villages, help make villages drought free, and if we could work at a value proposition to revive the their own productivity of their land. De-risking farming was our objective. That how do you de-risk the farmer and the farming system through
Mm,
a sustainable method. So we worked end to end on that, starting from farming production system and water security, going right up to organizing FPOs for marketing context.
mm,
So for me, actually, the 5-6 first years there were the most intense and some of the best of my professional years. At the same time, I would say that we did the same kind of mistake which many development professionals do, where we our initiative to engage is far more than, I mean, the patience is not there to kind of engage with communities and allow a kind of planning process to come as a bottom up, that impatience. So we did some wonderful work in drought proofing in so many different ways in farming and other contexts. But I think we could have done better in the institution building processes. I mean, at some point we became critical to and more important in the process, whereas the objective was to make us redundant, you know, and
mm,
that was a big challenge. But we did establish, and you also said about my own this thing. So I took up farming because I had not, I mean, three generations in my family had not done, and to be working with farmers, I thought I need to learn firsthand. And honestly, first 5-6 years, whatever could go wrong went wrong consistently. either poor rain, delayed rain, too much rain, too much weeds,
Mhm.
no harvest, not enough harvest, plenty of harvest, prices dropping down, all sequences, everything. So I also learned in the process firsthand as to what all could go wrong, went wrong, and how a farmer defies all economic theories of putting the highest effort, highest risks, and doesn't get ever the
Result.
highest returns. No way. And that's one unfulfilled agenda that remains for me till now, that with a sad this thing that a person who produces food for at least four, five, six family equivalent
Yeah.
continues to barely survive. You know, and in terms of calculations and all, I mean, pure mathematical calculation. I mean, somebody who does 3,000 calories worth of work in a day, feeds less than 1,500 calories worth. So that is a balance. It doesn't sustain, which is why you see everything that you see around you, that the tragedies that are there.
Yeah,
So
yes.
yeah,
Still, yesterday only, our alumnus Dr. Swati was in campus, who was no, just recently
yeah,
be selected for the World Food Prize, the
yeah,
Field Award. So she was also kind of now sharing this similar experiences, similar stories in her own experiments, where she's talking about from lab to farm to farm to market. So how as scientists we have now they have to kind of drive the process, which is recognizing that now how many small and marginal farmers we have. So that's, yeah, it's a big concern. But during, I think, while we were working on this wasteland, even the 2013, the Kedarnath tragedy happened.
yeah,
And I think a lot of efforts from Reliance Foundation also moved towards that,
yes,
very actively went there and
yeah,
participated in the disaster relief. That itself, again, I would say that it was, again, while you were learning in terms of the all kind of now uncertainties, etc., in the now in the farming space, and then suddenly it's like now there in
yeah,
the now it's so how have been that, and were you also there then?
yeah.
Mm,
In in fact, thanks. I mean, whatever else, Pidhi, I think you've done your homework very well on my journey. So, yeah, I think 17th July or something this happened,
yeah,
and roughly,
13 July, 13
yeah,
July.
and
Even my parents were there, so I
oh,
also remember, but we got them back,
oh,
thankfully.
so I was there on 23rd. 23rd I reached, and beyond Rudraprayag, everything was broken. And on the other side, towards Uttarkashi, same context. And I and another colleague, we both walked right up to first to Khimat and then Gupt Kashi side and all, and there was total devastation. And we were planning on rescue like all others. The district admin had also planned, the group of NGOs coming together, what is required, material, everything. But much before that, long, I mean, so what impacted? So what I did was we asked a loads of our people, a whole team of almost close to 100 people. We deployed in both these places, and my message was simply this: just go meet people with an open-ended agenda and just listen to them, just hear them out to understand as to how does the world look like from their side, what is it that's bothering them at most, and what would make sense to them. And that drove our thing. Now the reason behind this was my own not so pleasant experience long back. So
Mhm.
1984, I was in second year in college, and that's when 31st no, October, there were these riots in Delhi, the Sikh riots.
Mhm.
And we had one of our professors, Professor Nandita Narayan, who was like my kind of god, guru, everything, so mentor. And she asked us, a group of students, to gather together to help in respond as a relief work from at the riot. So we'd gone to a particular street in East Delhi, Kalyanpuri, Kante, and we were just barely 20. kids. And we were told, we were given a notepad, a pen, and a kind of bag, small bag, saying that you just need to go from house to house to find out what do people need, and so that we can organize supplies, blankets, rations, utensils, and this, that, etc. And we had no past experience or anything of any, even an understanding of, relief work, disaster, or any that kind. We went there house to house, and when we would ask, so there were these women sitting outside the house. They would just cry, and they would just keep crying. And why? Because actually almost all the men in that street had been killed and burnt actually in the houses. And these women, this was just 2 days before that. So these women were just sitting outside. And after two, three houses, it suddenly dawned. I mean, the whole thing hit us very hard. I mean, that we looked ridiculous. I mean, our questions looked ridiculous, our lack of understanding, our totally being kind of out of depth in that context, everything. And then we realized that all people, I mean, we just went and sat. We just went and sat and held hands, and we were not trained. We were not initiated or trained or understanding. That's a long story anyway, but that stayed back in defining future, relief interventions, that more than material and anything, a concern and engagement, a listening to, and then figuring out would be far more meaningful. And therefore we actually, I mean, I am very kind of content with how meaningfully we could respond and be of use there in various ways. And we also learned collaborating with other NGOs, so that we don't duplicate or
Yeah.
complicate matters by
Right.
overloading. And there was a phrase which Rudraprayag collector used. He said, "एक दो ये आपदा आ गया था, the cloud पर, दूसरा आपदा बिस्लेरी और कंबल का आ गया है करके." He said Dehradun airport has been
Flooded
inundated
with.
with loads of Bisleri bottles and biscuits and blankets, much more
Mm.
in excess to what was needed. Drinking water, he said, anyway was not an issue. It wasn't needed. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah. So very broadly, that was the learning from there.
Mhm, mhm. So, I think we have exhausted a lot of our time on
Yeah,
nuts.
sorry. Yes.
So, I would like to know, like, you have been for last 6, 7 years working in the space of children. Now, so how are you approaching this space? Like
So I think,
your SOS, though in between, I'm aware that you also was on board of Udyogini. In between, you also started Udayan
yeah,
or Udyan, where I read somewhere like it was mainly an experiment to understand how small is beautiful can actually counter these ideas
yeah,
of scale.
yeah,
So, was that your own social
yeah.
enterprise?
Yeah, Udayan
Okay.
is like a small NGO initiative of my own, which
Okay.
in small ways continues to try and be of use, from me being grateful to whatever life has given me. That
Okay.
continue. SOS and Save, I think, I mean, both wonderful in their own ways. And I think children or youth, the future citizens of the country, I
Hmm.
mean, all the organizations put together barely touch. So if you have 50 crore youth, and if you have roughly, I'm saying data of 15, 20 crore of those being in vulnerable or distress, all of us put together barely touch 1 crore, or 10, 20, a few million. We fall way short of the problem in our own way. Despite, I mean, all the NGOs of working for children, I'm saying all of them.
Hmm.
So I think we could learn a little modesty, first of all, from that, because I think that's one. Second is the challenge that I'm having is a stickiness factor. Somewhere from being cause driven, we become donor driven. So a lot of engagements, the boundary conditions are put by donors,
Right.
and that is a big challenge. And because donors look mindset has been more of projects and short term and quick
Yeah.
returns, and people are looking for outcomes and impacts even before you reach a particular place.
Right.
And I think transformative change, and particularly for children, would require a continuous engagement for a few years, 3
Mm-hmm.
to 5 to 7 or 10. So I'm trying to have our organization think of a holistic approach
Mm-hmm.
where we do take benefit or leverage from what donors want, but provide much more to children than what donors would ask for, so that the same is available for donor also. So that's one thing that's challenging, which is engaging me. The second part is bringing children as a continuity of the participatory process as the primary stakeholders, to bring them into the forefront of our agendas, to evolve that agenda, to participate in it. My aspiration is to have some youth in our organization's board in the next, couple of years at least. But not as a token presence, but as a whole organized effort and an equity being offered, so that their voice is also there in the planning process and in asking the professionals for accountability. Okay, what have we done with all the resources? So
Right.
these are two, three things that are keeping me kind of busy right now, or restless.
See, I would say that there are very few leaders who would get an opportunity to kind of be part of a revisioning or rebranding exercise in an
Yeah.
organization. And I'm sure, like, I know that your second name is your wife's name. So you have been experimental with the name, and I see that even you went on about rebranding your organization, and not necessarily if we are in India, it's like bringing the changing the name to Bal Raksha Bharat. So if you can kind of now give us the inside leadership insights on that, how did you go about where this idea, now when this idea struck you, and how did you kind of go about executing this idea?
Okay. So some of the things, the credits are not to me actually. It's
Okay.
legacy. So Save the Children in India in 2004, decades back, was registered as Bal Raksha Bharat, which is literally the translated meaning of Save the Children,
Stage.
and
Yeah.
there. And yet, actually, we had positioned, due to the legacy and 100 years and an affiliation to the international movement, as an identity. It's like in most households in India, you have two names. Like if you ask the Bongs, so they have this Daknam, Bhalonam, one
Yeah.
formal and one friendly name, and this, that, and all. So our formal name is Balraksha Bharat, which is the name in which we've always signed all MOUs, everything.
Okay.
Our friendly name has been Save the Children, and I had been pushing for the formal name to be owned by us, because we were in our adolescent age. That if this is the name, let's be known by this name. This had nothing to do with the politics that was going around in India as being the reason to position it. But yes, it works there too. You know, but the primary driver was to reclaim the original name we were born with, or the given name we were born. So so that's how. And it's been interesting, because even when you choose to reclaim that name, people's familiarity with you, the identity that you
Um,
built over a period, is different. So everybody struggles. The
okay.
external world struggles, our
Mhm.
minds struggle, and sometimes people impute meanings into that, which either look for too much wisdom or too much conspiracy, both of which is not there. you know it's just an assertion of a formal name.
Oh, that's a very interesting story. Like now,
Yeah.
an organization having two names, and the formal name is not really known, and
Yeah.
now then we are reclaiming that name. That's
Yeah.
so. But as you are working in the child space now, I'm sure you as a parent also would be guiding you as a leader who is working in that space. So how do you see like your now your own experiences, your personal experiences how your children had been brought up, and how you see a lot of now that you are working with, how do you see that kind of, is there, or is it like not
Yeah.
really?
So I'm one of the most luckiest, fortunate guys in that. So my children brought me up, and
Okay.
children and Irma have a big connect. So my child, my first, both my children came around at Irma. The first one spent considerable years there, and it's like some of those coincidences in life. He came around at a time when, among our people, the professors, the community,
Uh-huh.
and Irma and DDB, he was one of the youngest. I mean, in his this thing. So he got the love and affection of the whole world around. So he grew up as a, like, the popular saying, they say it takes a whole village to bring up a child.
Mhm.
So that's what happened with him, that he was absolutely, and so far as I am concerned, actually I learned a lot through how he saw the world. So my engagement, my learning, lot of relationships got redefined, of people and context, from the places where my children would be comfortable with, people with whom I would relate more, and somewhere where we got along very well, and but more than anything, a lot of life's lessons, like the ability to wake up every morning and look forward to the day and not carry the hangover of previous day, was one big context I learned. I mean, from home, from my child. And the second thing was the ability to forgive, to forgive and forget and move on, was something I did that didn't come earlier easy to me. And third was, giving infinite trust and faith in, even in face of adversity and context. These were things, the purity of it came from children. I mean, I could just kind of say endless story. I still remember, those of you who know Irma streets. So for a long time, I stayed on that last street where dispensary was at one end and the presswala was at another. And I used to teach my son cycling there, and he didn't like the idea of side wheels. So I would be holding and he would be riding the cycle. Over a period, I used to start leaving, his cycle, the control, and he
Mhm.
would keep riding. And those houses are built like in angles. At
Yes.
one particular time, I remember clearly that as he was riding well, I let go of the cycle and hid behind one of those walls. And I think somewhere at the corner of dispensary, he fell down. He fell hard. And those with kids would know that when your kid gets hurt, you get super hurt. You get agitated. So I saw him fall there. He cried aloud. I saw him, and I wanted to rush and pick him up, but something held me back. So I held back for a few minutes. After shouting, he actually saw aage piche. He was looking for his appa. He didn't find, and so he picked up the cycle, dusted his shirt, climbed on it, and continued to ride. Rode like he was born to ride. And like, that's one thing that taught me a very important lesson, that you, if you fall down, you get
Yeah.
up and move on. I could say endlessly. I don't want to take a time, but yeah, my biggest learnings came, from all such many things with my time spent with kids. Irma and those days allowed me that time, the indulgence of that time. That's also there. The Bombays and Delhis don't allow that luxury.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
You continue to be like, no, even when you were working with NDDB, you associated with IRMA very formally and
Yeah.
floated courses, floated MDPs. And I think you were the first one to initiate something on public advocacy, which is now, you would happy to know that we run now full elective
Oh,
courses on public policy and advocacy.
wow.
Though
Great.
the outcomes are different, that yeah, people are not necessarily starting their career in that space, but there are many in recent graduates from Ritu's batch or Rich's batch, no, like, and even in the recent past also we see that people are actually going abroad and then further strengthening their
Huh.
capabilities in that area. So you are also associated with another rural management school, IHMR, on
Yeah,
their board. So how do you so like what are your views on the rural management, or I would say that how would you like this discipline to evolve, and what present and future needs this education should strive to meet for a more fair, more equitable society that now at one point we envisaged, and where we know that as we were talking about, that the cooperative is not the only solution. There are many, and it acts as a balancing. So we also see that the rural domain and the development or transformation that we talk about is not necessarily now just limited to one actor, civil society or state or market, but there are more interlinkages now. In this kind of a dynamic and evolving space, how do you look at like how uh, a rural management discipline should kind of look at and no, envision itself for the near future.
sure. So I'll be very candid and straightforward on this.
Yeah,
I
yes.
think, I mean, I see a very kind of not so welcome trend of academic institutions actually containing the students' minds. So even on lateral thinking, actually, there is a there are boundary conditions, and I think management institutions are looking at leadership as a course or a module that can be taught. You know, you're looking at certain attributes. So I think somewhere if we could bring back, reduce the load of academics and enhance the students experiential learning components where they test the boundaries, where they move, you know, beyond certain contexts and test out, because that is what would ready them for the larger world. And I think by and large, not looking for predictability. So in the rural context, let's say in rural development context, we're looking for very disruptive solutions, very original from the context on the ground. So I think we need people who will not take no for an answer, who will also not look at references and predictable or what is precedences and context, but actually shake up and question and disrupt everything to create and construct, and to be willing to take the falls and hurts and failures and context. Or maybe on the other hand, you could create a module just on how to cope up with failures. You know, how do you add, how can failures add to our value to our life and learning. And it took me a big this thing in my organization to organize a 4-day seminar on failing intelligent. I just invited everybody that submit ideas on where things didn't work, where things, people are used to failures being reflecting on performance, on adversity, on
Yeah.
penalty. And so there was this ambition of actually wanting a chapter in annual report dedicated to what went wrong this year. We finally did it last year. We got that
Um,
chapter in, saying, well, we were not God's gift. There are some things that don't work. And I think to humanize all those contexts is what the institutions could do more. I think that could do wonderful for the preparing the students for the larger world. You know,
That's something really very, very insightful, huh? How to cope with failures and what went wrong.
yeah.
So I know that quickly after this talk, I'm going to download that annual report and read that chapter. And yes, it's very important to kind of now focus more on experiential than more of classroom kind of a learning. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. So it has been really wonderful talking to you. Uh, and I would say, like, as we talk about that, a good portion of human's life lies in many little nameless or unremembered acts of life, I would say your leadership has several stories. Uh, those little stories where, which is kind of characterized by, first I could see the having confidence in oneself, and having that belief that not necessarily a classroom or a degree makes you capable, and working on that confidence, and above all the keenness to learn from every context, everyone, and all the time,
Thank you.
irrespective. So leadership is not about rank, power, etc., but it's all about learning and growing together. Thank you so much. It has been a very empowering experience for me, not in terms of talking to you and knowing more about you. Uh, we
Thank you.
Thank you, friends, for joining us. Uh, I would like, if there are, like, if any of you also want to kind of now ask any question, or now converse with Professor Sudarshan, please feel free. So you can unmute yourself, or we will end the conversation. So we'll end the conversation, sir. Uh,
Yes.
okay.
Thank you so much, Preeti ma'am and Sudarshan sirs, for actually taking out time and doing this session. And it was quite an enriching session, understanding like it was almost playing a life journey from 1991 when you were mentioning we wouldn't even be thinking about a post graduation course then, to listening to your experiences. It's been an enriching conversation, surely, in many aspects, like making you, forcing you think on what you're doing in your current days. And I was so engrossed that I forgot to admit two or three people actually. So apologies if those people are still on the call. Uh, I have recorded the session. Recording will be available and we will shortly share the link. And thank you once again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Have a good
Thanks,
weekend.
everybody.
Thank
You
you.
Thank you,
too,
sir.
all of
Thanks,
you.
ma'am. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.